According to ESPN's Adrian Wojnarowski, there are multiple teams interested in trading up for the Sacramento Kings' fourth overall pick in this 2022 NBA draft, presumably to take Jaden Ivey. I'll tell you why the Sacramento Kings are in a position of extreme power that they need to exploit to the very limit on draft night. It's all in today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all regular season and all off season. Ladies and gentlemen, Locked On is partnering with Arcade 1UP to give away 3 free NBA Jam Shack machines. Stay tuned for later in the show to learn how you can enter. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I am a Sacramento sports producer and reporter for ABC 10 News. And before we dive into what we're covering on today's show, congratulations are in order for the Golden State Warriors. I know there are Sacramento Kings fans listening to this podcast that do not want to give the Warriors the respect that they deserve or congratulate the Warriors in any way, but we have to give it out there. The Golden State Warriors were a fantastic story this year, considering the fact that just 2 seasons ago, they had the worst record in the NBA, and here they are, NBA champions for the 4th time in the last 8 years. Steph Curry finally gets his NBA MVP. There are so many great storylines for the Golden State Warriors this year, like Klay Thompson coming back from the couple catastrophic injuries that kept him out for over 2 years. Gary Payton II really emerging as an extremely important piece for the Warriors after being cut. Andrew Wiggins becoming an all-star and playing like the second best player on the Golden State Warriors throughout the NBA Finals and much of the NBA playoffs. A lot from a basketball standpoint to like about the season for the Golden State Warriors. All right, I got it out of the way. Now I can go back to not liking them and focusing on the team that we should like in Northern California. That is the Sacramento Kings. And hey, maybe one day the Kings and the Warriors will actually be good at the same time. I don't think, unless I'm mistaken, that the Kings and Warriors have ever been in the playoffs at the same time, which is just insane to think about. But that Warriors dynasty definitely going strong, and the Kings are hoping to begin their own dynasty at some point in time. And a lot of, or maybe their best chance at starting a dynasty comes with this 4th pick in the 2022 NBA draft. The 4th pick that the Kings were lucky to get, moving up from 7 to 4 in the draft lottery last month. And now a 4th pick that potentially holds the keys to this entire draft. Now, how can that be? Well, the top 3 picks are for the most part pretty set in stone. The belief is that Jabari Smith Jr. is going to go number 1, and that Paolo Banchero and Chet Holmgren will be 2 or 3 in some kind of order. Number 4 is where this draft truly begins, although it's very possible for one of those 3 to slide. And I honestly wouldn't be shocked to see that happen on draft night, although I wouldn't certainly bet that was going to happen on draft night, at least at this point in time. Still, a lot can change in the 6 days that we have now until the NBA draft. But really, that 4th spot, some believe that this is a 4-player draft. So many believe that Jaden Ivey out of Purdue is the obvious pick for the Kings or whoever is at 4. There are others that believe that this is a top 3 heavy draft and that Jaden Ivey, Keegan Murray, Shaedon Sharpe, those guys are the next tier, and the draft can go in any direction really from pick 4 all the way to pick 10, maybe even beyond that. The lottery is completely up for grabs. But number 4 really decides how the draft is going to go. And that is a very powerful and valuable position that the Sacramento Kings have, for lack of a better term, stumbled their way into, thanks to the luck of the ping pong balls. According to Adrian Wojnarowski, and he said this before Game 6 of the NBA Finals last night, there are multiple teams who are interested in moving up to number 4. Multiple teams who like the idea of Jaden Ivey. They believe Jaden Ivey is available because of the questionable fit for Jaden Ivey in Sacramento. And according to Woj, the Sacramento Kings view this draft as a 4-team draft, or rather 4-player draft. So what does that suggest? That suggests to me that Monte McNair and the Sacramento Kings are making it known, look, Jaden Ivey is the 4th best player in this draft. We are not letting him make it past 4. So if you want him, come and get him. That's what I am reading into what Woj is reporting. And based off of the alleged interest from teams like Detroit, like Indiana, like New York, like Washington, the New York Knicks, it doesn't surprise me that the Kings are trying to take advantage of this position. I guarantee you those aren't the only 4 teams, although those are the 4 that are mainly discussed. I guarantee you there are more teams on top of those 4 that are interested in moving up for Jaden Ivey. And I think if indeed, as Woj is reporting, this is the Kings' tactic, I think they're playing their cards about as perfect as you can. Now, there is an element of risk to this. If the Kings are going to pull off this bluff, but it's not really a bluff, if they're going to pull off this tactic, this ploy, they have to see it through to the end. And what I mean by that is you do not move this draft pick unless you are absolutely blown away by an offer that will not happen, or I'm pretty confident will not happen. You do not move this draft pick until you are on the clock on draft night, because at that point you have the full context. If indeed the top 3 goes as expected, you know that Jaden Ivey is there for the taking. You have 5 minutes to basically field all the phone calls from everybody else and say, hey, we've been in preliminary talks. Believe me, the Kings will be in preliminary talks with any team who's interested in moving up to number 4 well before draft night. They probably have already been for a while now. There will be framework deals in place. But as soon as the Kings are on the clock, as soon as those 5 minutes are ticking away and multiple teams want to move up to Jaden Ivey because they believe the Kings and they believe that Sacramento will not allow Jaden Ivey to move past 4, even if they like other players like a Keegan Murray, who is a better fit, the pressure is put on them all of a sudden. And suddenly those framework deals, them not being willing to offer this player, maybe that player is suddenly on the table because they know that if they don't make that offer, they're never going to get Jaden Ivey, or even worse to them, another team is going to swoop in with their own offer and take Jaden Ivey away. It doesn't surprise me at all that Jaden Ivey has this many suitors. He's an exciting guard. He is considered to be the best guard in this draft, and this is a guards league. Plus, he's flashy, and he has a very high potential to be a star. Doesn't surprise me at all that multiple teams behind the Kings are interested in moving into this spot. And the more teams that are rumored to have interest in Jaden Ivey, the more power the Sacramento Kings have. And look, here's the worst case scenario. The Kings push this to the very limit. They put as much pressure as they possibly can on the clock. Those 5 minutes are ticking away, and still they don't get the deals that they deem worthy of trading number 4 overall. You take Jaden Ivey. I have questions. I have questions about Jaden Ivey and his fit with the Sacramento Kings. I've talked about him for the last month. You know me personally. I would pick Keegan Murray if I were the Kings at 4. But if this is truly the tactic that they're employing, if this is truly the way that they think they can maximize the value of this 4th pick, you have to be willing to see it through. You have to be willing to take Jaden Ivey and maybe find a way to move him later on. Just because you make the selection doesn't mean you can't move the piece later. Now, I did not expect myself to be arguing in this way, because there is still very much a part of me that would much rather the Kings just take Keegan Murray at 4 and let Detroit at 5 or whoever else fight it out for Jaden. I still think the Kings would be smart in a way in doing that. I still think Keegan Murray can be better than Jaden Ivey, and that Keegan Murray could be, and maybe should be, the pick for the Sacramento Kings and will be a better fit for the Sacramento Kings. All that can be true. But I trust Monty McNair to maximize the value of this pick. He has to. He either has to get the pick 100% right by drafting a player, or he has to find a way to get absolute peak value. That is why I'm not interested in these rumored trade packages from the Knicks and Washington Wizards. These packages centered around Kyle Kuzma, Rui Hachimura. I'm sorry, that doesn't do it for the 4th overall pick, especially considering that the Kings could have had Kyle Kuzma, almost had Kyle Kuzma last offseason for Buddy freaking Hield. Now, I know the Kings would also get the 10th pick in this alleged Washington Wizards package, and there is value for the Kings to get at 10. You talk about adding Kyle Kuzma, who's your starting 4, plus a potentially good player like an AJ Griffin if he falls that far, or a Sochan or a Dyson Daniels, although I don't think he's going to fall that far. There's value there for sure. But is that the best you can get for number 4, especially if there are multiple teams who are interested in moving up, who are bidding against one another? You're in the power position. You're like the auctioneer. If you're Monty McNair on draft night, you're going, yep, keep going, raise it up. I'm considering this offer from this team, so you got to beat that. Let them fight it out amongst one another. And if the right deal or the ideal deal rises to the top, take that deal. If not, you take Jaden Ivey and say, we told you we were going to take this guy. You want him? You can still come get him. Let's play out this hypothetical scenario. Let's say the Detroit Pistons really want Jaden Ivey, but they're not willing to make Saddiq Bey available. If Saddiq Bey is really the guy that you want from the Kings, more than Jeremy Grant, you're saying we are not moving him unless Saddiq Bey is on the table. The Detroit Pistons say no. All right. You take Jaden Ivey at 4. Suddenly the Pistons are on the clock at 5. The Pistons take Keegan Murray. All right. Let's get back to the negotiation table. We will trade Jaden Ivey, give us Keegan Murray, and we still want Saddiq Bey, or give us this asset in addition to that. There's still time. The point is, even if the Kings milk it all the way to the final seconds of being on the clock on draft night and are forced to actually make a selection and do take Jaden Ivey, they still have plenty of time for the remainder of the draft, remainder of the offseason, hell, next season, future seasons, to move Jaden Ivey if the interest for him is really that high. But I also do believe that as much as these teams allegedly want Jaden Ivey, they also want control that, or the power that the 4th overall pick presents. That's why most of these teams are going to try and get the Kings to move on from that pick before draft night itself, which again, unless the Kings are blown away by an offer, which I don't see a realistic one out there, I think Monty McNair would be a fool for trading this pick before draft night. I think there's little to no chance. I honestly feel comfortable enough saying I don't think there's any chance that the Sacramento Kings trade the 4th pick before draft night. They're going to get full context. They're going to put maximum pressure on multiple teams and let the bidding war commence. And I think that is a power position for the Sacramento Kings to exploit. If that's truly the plan, Monty McNair is doing it absolutely right, in my opinion. Absolutely right. That was not a tactic. Well, I mean, it kind of was, but not this flawlessly a tactic that I exploited in our Locked On Ultimate NBA mock draft. Episode 1 and 2 are out right now. Picks 1 through 12 in those 2 episodes. You might have already heard what I did with the 4th pick, but I'll explain it to you and I'll share why I made the move that I made in the next segment. But again, if the Kings are trying to use this 4 pick and trying to cause a bidding war amongst these other teams, I think Monty McNair is doing it right. What do you think? Let me know at MattGeorgeSack on Twitter. Email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com. Leave your thoughts in the YouTube comment section down below. Do you like this move? Would you rather the Kings just take Jaden Ivey if he's clearly that valuable? What would you need in order to move off from the number 4 pick? Let me know. Again, at MattGeorgeSack on Twitter, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com if you want to email me. And if you're watching on YouTube, get loose in the comment section down below. Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by Built Bars. They have a new Built Bar that they sent to me, and I wish I got to try it, but I didn't. Because before I even realized that they sent it to me, my wife got a hold of it, and the Mud Pie Bar We were sent 3 of them. All 3 of them were gone before I got home from work. Yeah, she devoured them, but she loved them. So I should really be inviting her on to tell you how great these bars are. I'll just relay to her or relay to you some of the things that she said to me. Our friends at Built are always coming out with new and amazing flavors, and their latest is their Mud Pie Bar and their Mud Pie Puffs. Now, they didn't send us any Mud Pie Puffs. I'm going to make sure I get one of those before my wife gets any of them. If you're not sure what mud pie tastes like, if you're a chocolate fan, you better sit down for this because I'm about to blow your mind. The new Mud Pie Bar is rich whipped cream and chocolate mousse smothered in 100% whipped chocolate and topped with cookies and cream crumble. Yeah, that's the Mud Pie Bar. And oh, by the way, all that sweetness, all that chocolate, all that deliciousness, these bars are good for you. We're talking only 150 calories and only 8 grams of sugar. That can't be beat. Like all Built bars, they're covered in 100% chocolate. They're absolutely delicious. You can try their new Mud Bar. You can try their new granola. You can try their puffs, which are protein-infused marshmallows. Whatever you want on Built.com, make sure you use our promo code to save yourself some money while enjoying this deliciousness. That's LOCKED15 for 15% off. Again, LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Spoiler alert, I'm warning you right now. If you did not listen to part 1, picks 1 through 6 of our Locked On Ultimate NBA mock draft, I encourage you to go and listen to that. Every single year, we do a phenomenal job here on this network. All of the local hosts take over their team's draft for a night. We can make our selections. We can move the picks. We can do whatever we want. It is draft night and we are in full control. And then we go through a full draft like it is the NBA draft. We have analysts. We have local experts. We have so many people weighing in, sharing their thoughts on the draft. And then it's fun to look back at some of our past drafts and see how good we've done. My track record, honestly, on these is not too shabby. Really not too shabby with being in control of the Sacramento Kings. But I'm going to pause for about 2 seconds here and tell you to pause this episode, go and listen to episode 1, and then come back and listen to this segment because I'm going to explain to you why I made the moves that I did, why I selected the player that I did in the ultimate mock draft. All right, this is your chance. Last chance. 3, 2, 1. Here we go. I traded the number 4 overall pick to the Indiana Pacers, along with Rashawn Holmes and Justin Holiday for the number 6 pick, for the number 56 pick, I believe. It was a second round pick this year, and a top 5 protected 2023 Indiana Pacers draft pick. And in addition to that, also got the services of Malcolm Brogdon. Now, I know there's concerns with Malcolm Brogdon's injury history. He's struggled to play more than 50 games over the last couple of seasons. Of course, he is a guard. The Kings' best player is a guard in De'Aaron Fox. But Malcolm Brogdon brings grit. He solves your starting 2-guard question. And if he is not available for all 82 games, as expected, you have Davion Mitchell, who's able to step in and pick up that slack at that starting 2-guard spot, or even Dante DiVincenzo if needed. However, this move makes it easy to move on from Dante DiVincenzo and not re-sign him if Monte McNair wants to save money. The Indiana Pacers took Jaden Ivey at 4. He was the guy that they clearly wanted. I was able to exploit that for maximum value. And I, no surprise, took Keegan Murray, number 6. I was happy to hear that our analysts really liked the trade for the Sacramento Kings. I had Damian Barling. He was our Odyssey expert. We're partners with Odyssey in this show. The Odyssey expert, he weighed in, and I love what he said. He said the Kings, with this move, leave draft night with the guy that they want, or the guy that I want, in Keegan Murray, and they leave draft night with their 2 starter holes filled. You still got Fox, you still got Harrison Barnes, you still got Domantas Sabonis. That's your 1, your 3, and your 5. You have Keegan Murray at your 4, Malcolm Brogdon at your 2. You leave draft night and head into free agency with your 5 starting spots solidified. Now, of course, later in the offseason, if Monte McNair wanted in this hypothetical scenario, he could still move Harrison Barnes or any one of those 5 guys to bolster this lineup even more if he wants to. But you leave draft night with all 5 starting spots. You get a player in Keegan Murray who I believe is going to make a day one impact if he is selected by the Sacramento Kings. And on top of that, you get a future draft pick from the Indiana Pacers. Yeah, it's top 5 protected for next year. I highly doubt the Indiana Pacers are going to be one of 5 worst teams in the NBA. They could get lucky and move up in the lottery, and then they get to keep their pick. But I expect the Indiana Pacers pick to be more valuable than the Sacramento Kings pick next year. I expect the Indiana Pacers to be a worse team than the Sacramento Kings are next year. If they're not, then the Kings have colossally failed, especially in this ultimate NBA mock draft scenario that I put together. A team of Fox, Brogdon, Davion Mitchell, Harrison Barnes, Dante DiVincenzo, theoretically, Domantas Sabonis and Keegan Murray should be a lot better than Tyrese Halliburton and anything else the Indiana Pacers do. Jaden Ivey, Miles Turner, if they keep him, whatever. The Kings could have 2, at least 1, but maybe even 2 lottery picks in next year's draft. Those are also assets that later in the offseason or next season at the trade deadline, the Kings can move to add even more win now pieces. I loved this trade. I loved this trade for the Sacramento Kings. Again, I understand the concerns of Malcolm Brogdon, but I tried other conversations. Trust me, this was the best trade that I could get for the Kings, to still get a top player in this draft in Keegan Murray, still get the guy that I wanted while also picking up multiple future assets. To me, it was an absolute no-brainer. Really like the deal. I do know that there are going to be some of you that don't like the deal. Let's talk about it. Tell me why. At MattGeorgeSack on Twitter. Email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com. Leave your thoughts in the YouTube comment section down below. I want to hear why you don't necessarily like this deal. Let me know. But I think this would be a home run for the Kings on draft night, and I don't think it's that far out of the realm of possibility. Sometimes with these mock drafts that we do, and you have media members who are taking over teams for a night, sometimes it can get pretty silly, get pretty crazy. The trades aren't necessarily the most realistic. I could see this trade actually going down. I don't know if Indiana includes next year's draft pick, but if I'm the Kings, I push for it. And I did. I pushed for it. I actually pushed for a little bit more, but I was asking for a little bit too much for the deal to go down. I think this is a trade that realistically could happen. I think the Kings could realistically move back to 6, bring in Malcolm Brogdon, and still get Keegan Murray on draft night. I think that's very, very possible. And if that were to happen, I think that would be a home run of a draft night for the Sacramento Kings. But of course, I'm tooting my own horn here. I'm the guy who negotiated the deal and accepted the deal. So of course, I'm going to like it. I want to hear what you think on it. And just because you heard that doesn't mean you shouldn't go and listen to the entire Ultimate Mock Draft, because there are other great moves, great analysis. You'll be surprised by some of the picks and where they go, especially with who Detroit took at number 5. I think you're going to really like this production that we put together. Again, we do it every single year. We do a phenomenal job on it. Go and check out the Locked On Ultimate NBA Mock Draft if you haven't already. And NFL fans, we do this Ultimate Mock Draft for the NFL Draft as well. Of course, the NFL Draft has already happened, but I'm just telling you, every single offseason in both the NFL and NBA, we do this show. It takes hours upon hours of work by our national team, and they do such a phenomenal job. I really encourage you to go and listen to it. Kill some time before the actual draft on Thursday, the 23rd. I told you at the beginning of this show that we are partnering with Arcade 1Up to give away 3 NBA Jam Shaq Edition machines. Boom shakalaka, we have big news. The one, the only NBA Jam is back. Arcade 1Up is the leader in at-home retro arcade games, and they're not only bringing the best game ever back, they've made it even bigger with a, wait for it, Shaq Edition machine. People are obsessed with NBA Jam. It is such a guilty pleasure in many ways. It brings back so many wonderful memories for all of us, the nostalgia factor of NBA Jam, but it's more recent. And of course, Shaquille O'Neal is slapped on that bad boy. It's one of the first games ever to feature real and digitalized NBA licensed teams, no fouls, no free throws, no quarters required, and it's in your own home so you can show off to your friends, invite them over, and feel like you've got the best arcade you could possibly have with just one game. They are giving away NBA Jam Shaq Editions, 3 NBA Jam Shack editions to Locked On listeners. You can enter for a chance to win a game console for your man cave at arcade1up.com/locked on. That's arcade, the number 1up.com/locked on. You've got until July 8th to enter to win NBA Jam Shack edition console. And if you want to buy one, if you don't win, they're only $399. Don't miss out. Enter today. And who are you going to play with? The countdown is on to the NBA draft. I want to know what your thoughts are right now. I want to know if you were Monty McNair, what your plan is for draft night. What is your board like? Let's start finalizing everything. A lot can change in the final few days before draft night, but let's start solidifying what we think the Kings are going to do on draft night, what we expect the Kings to do, what we would like, what would be disappointed with, because I guarantee you, no matter what the Kings do on draft night, we are going to analyze the absolute you-know-what out of it and put it under about as sharp of a microscope as you possibly can. You know why? Because this offseason is essential for the Sacramento Kings. Monty McNair still doesn't have his extension yet. Everything that is to be analyzed and broken down will be analyzed and broken down here on the Locked On Kings podcast. I can guarantee you that. So make sure you're getting ready for NBA draft night. The Locked On NBA Network is going to be doing a phenomenal NBA draft show for you that, of course, I will be a part of. And if you're in Sacramento, make sure you have your TV on ABC 10. That's actually where the first round of the draft is going to be aired. And after the draft, we're going to have a special edition of our Toyota Sports Extra show that I am both producing and co-hosting with my guy, Kevin John. So there's going to be so much draft coverage for you in Sacramento and on the Locked On Podcast Network. I hope you will spend your draft night with us, and hopefully we are celebrating a good move for the Sacramento Kings and the start of what hopefully is finally the turnaround needed for this team to make the playoffs next season. Thank you to everybody who has been a part of our draft coverage to this point. Still got more great draft coverage coming for you, more guests coming next week in preparation for the NBA draft, thinking about doing a final like NBA draft media roundtable right before draft night to talk about and finalize our ideas, our beliefs of what the Kings will do and what the Kings should do next week. I'm hoping to be able to pull that off. And I have a question, or rather a favor to ask of you. If you haven't already, we are at right on the cusp. We're just three reviews away on Apple Podcasts from the Sacramento Kings, or the Locked On Kings podcast, rather, getting 350 reviews. And like I said, once we get to that goal, I will be buying a pair of lower bowl opening night Kings tickets, and I will be giving them away to Locked On Kings listeners for helping me reach that goal. So if you haven't already, get us over that hump. I really would appreciate it. And of course, I would appreciate you continuing to support this podcast going forward for the draft, after the draft, into free agency, summer league, and beyond. Really appreciate you taking the time. As always, can't wait to have you join me on the next episode. Until then, my name is Matt George. You have been listening to Locked On Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.